What's up y'all, Indominus B here, and in this video we're going to be taking a trip down memory lane and having a look at one of gaming's most legendary and brutally difficult series, Castlevania. I'll be specifically focusing on the 2D entries and saving the 3D games for another video. Now, something to note here is we will not include the Kid Dracula spin-offs or the Java games. And the order in which we cover each game is based chronologically on its North American release date. I want to also mention that this is the first video in a 3-part series. Without further ado, this is a brief history of 2D Castlevania. The first entry in the series, simply titled Castlevania, first launched in North America in May of 1987 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Starring Simon Belmont of the Belmont clan, the notorious vampire hunting family that has a history of striking down evil whenever and wherever it presents itself. Our main antagonist here is Dracula. Simon has been tasked with the goal of entering the castle, fighting his way through it, and taking him down to stop his reign of terror on humanity. Now, doing this may sound much easier than it actually is. This is one of the most painfully difficult games on the NES, requiring precise platforming and timing, all while taking down enemies. Our hero is equipped with his main weapon, the Vampire Killer, a whip passed down through generations and generations of Belmonts. You'll also pick up sub-weapons along the way, such as the axe, cross, and holy water, and to use these you have to pick up hearts, which is your magic. Now this can be a little confusing to newer players since in most games hearts count towards your life, or your health bar. However, that is not the case in Castlevania. You will pick up things such as chicken or pot roast to redeem your health. Each stage is split into multiple sub-levels, with a final boss waiting for you to take down at the end of each main stage. Ultimately, Castlevania would go on to do well, being praised by both critics and fans alike and selling a little over 1.5 million copies on the NES, and spanning a series that would last for decades to come. Next up, we have Haunted Castle for the arcade, releasing in September of 1988. Now, some would say this is a remake. I would consider it more to be an arcade adaptation, using similar locations, characters, and enemies from Castlevania 1, but an entirely different story. In the intro here, we have Simon walking with his bride when Dracula swoops in and abducts the newly wedded wife. As you may expect, Simon's not too happy about this, so he sets off to take down Dracula and retrieve his newlywed wife. As far as gameplay goes, there's not very much that's different here from the original Castlevania. You have your main weapon being the whip again, and you do pick up sub-weapons along the way. Now, keep in mind, this game was designed for the arcade. So they take that already brutal difficulty and crank it up 10 notches. I mean, this game is painfully punishing. You can tell it was designed to eat all the quarters in your pocket. Three months after Haunted Castle and a little over a year and a half after the initial game, the West would finally get a sequel to Castlevania titled Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. If you were looking for more of the same, this is not the sequel you were expecting. Instead, Simon's Quest takes the formula of the first game and flips it on its head entirely, introducing new RPG elements, such as a sort of side-scrolling open-world map with villages and towns that you can return to and speak with villagers to get clues and hints about what to do next or where to go. The story here takes place 7 years after the events of the first game, following Simon Belmont once again, where you learned that after defeating Dracula the last time, a curse was placed on him that will end his life early if not fixed. To cure this life-threatening curse, Simon must set out to gather the 5 remains of Dracula scattered throughout 5 dark palaces in the world. This game's difficulty comes in the form of its cryptic clues that are sometimes hard to decipher or just outright wrong due to poor translation. And some of these clues are so important that it can unfortunately make the game nearly impossible to progress for most players. While I do believe there's a lot of fun to be had here, and redeeming qualities such as the killer soundtrack, unfortunately this game is not looked back on as fondly as its predecessor and is usually reserved for the most die-hard and nostalgic of Castlevania fans. Our 4th installment in the series would take us over to the portable side of things with Castlevania The Adventure launching on the Game Boy in December of 1989. This game would star Christopher Belmont with Dracula once again reprising his role as the main villain. This game takes place roughly 1 century after Castlevania III and 1 century before the events with Simon Belmont in Castlevania I. As you've probably come to expect at this point, your whip is the main weapon once again this time around. However, there are no sub-weapons. It seems in an attempt to make up for this, they instead gave you the ability to shoot fireballs from the whip once fully upgraded. However, sub-weapons would have been a nice inclusion here, as some of the enemies can be pretty tough to take down. One thing that may have hardcore Castlevania fans scratching their head is that this game does not include stairs, instead being replaced by ropes that you can traverse up and down. Honestly, there's not much more to say about the gameplay here. It's pretty much what you've come to know and love with traditional Castlevania. It has been criticized pretty heavily for its slow and stiff character movement, making the game much more difficult than it should be at times. But this was the dev team's first crack at a portable Castlevania game, and back in 1989 when it launched, there was really nothing else quite like it on the Game Boy. Roughly 3.5 years after the first game's launch and success, we would receive the 3rd and final installment in the NES Castlevania trilogy. Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse would release for the Nintendo Entertainment System in September of 1990. The events of this game would take place roughly a couple centuries before Castlevania I, and this time starring Trevor Belmont, an ancestor of Simon. However, this time around, you are accompanied by 3 additional playable characters that you will meet throughout Trevor's journey. Grant, a pirate who moves faster, can climb walls, and has the ability to change direction mid-air. Alucard, son of Dracula, uses fireballs as his primary weapon and can turn into a bat mid-level at the expense of magic, which honestly makes some of the more difficult platforming sections a little too easy. And Sypha Belnades. While her primary attack is actually much weaker than the rest of the characters, her magical attacks, or elemental attacks, are much stronger. It can wipe out an entire screen of enemies. Now, something interesting to note here about Sypha is that Konami kinda played the same thing here that Nintendo did with Samus in the original Metroid game, keeping her gender a bit of a secret until the end of the game, where it was revealed Sypha was indeed a female when she is standing next to Trevor during the ending. Gameplay-wise, Dracula's Curse went back to its roots, with the precise platforming, timing, and taking down hordes of enemies that consist of classic horror movie monsters and ancient mythology. This game was a certified classic upon launch, and while it is viewed as the most difficult of the NES trilogy, it is looked back on very fondly. The sixth installment in the series would take us back to the Game Boy once again for Castlevania II: Belmont's Revenge. Releasing in August of 1991, Castlevania II: Belmont's Revenge was a direct sequel to the adventure. With Christopher Belmont reprising his role as the main protagonist, he set out to save his son Soleil Belmont, who went missing the day of his coming-of-age ceremony. Dracula, looking to revive his human form, has kidnapped Soleil Belmont, turned him into a demon, and used Soleil's strong magical power to revive himself. This game pretty much took what the adventure laid out and just built upon it with more polished controls, bringing in sub-weapons, however only 2 of them, and still retaining the Fireball Whip. One thing fans of the series will notice here is that Konami decided to change their basic level layout they've used up until this point, and instead opted to take a page out of Capcom's Mega Man series. Having a level select where you can pick from 4 different themed castles, and once completing all 4 of these, you will unlock Dracula's castle. Castlevania II: Belmont's Revenge is considered an improvement over the adventure. However, a lot of fans do still see the controls as slow and sluggish. In my opinion, if you're a fan of the classic Castlevania style, I think Belmont's Revenge is worth revisiting. Fast forward to December of 1991. The Super Nintendo had been out for a little over a year at this point, and Konami was about to deliver what a lot of fans considered to be the best Castlevania game of all time. In December of 1991, Konami would set the world ablaze with Super Castlevania IV. Man, now this is Castlevania. With vastly improved graphics and audio, showing off just what a 16-bit console could do, and utilizing the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 graphics, Konami really stepped their game up here. Super Castlevania IV is a remake of the original game, so you're going to see a lot of the same weapons. The whip is your main as before, which can be upgraded twice, just like in previous games. You also do get sub-weapons in here which require magic power. But a notable upgrade here is the versatility added to the whip. You can now use the whip to latch onto certain objects and swing yourself across gaps, which is cool and all, but the biggest upgrade here is the 8-directional attack. And this just makes combat so much better. Gone are the days of the awkward little short jumps trying to whip something directly in front of you. Super Castlevania IV launched to massively critical success and is considered by many of the fanbase to be one of the 2 best Castlevania games to date. However, to be considered one of the 2 best Castlevania games of all time, that must mean there's another. Thank you all so much for watching this video. This is part 1. Make sure you stick around and check out part 2. And if you enjoyed, drop a like and subscribe. And until next time, Indominus out.